Mitzvah Kuf Memtes. HaMitzvah Hatesha V'Arboim Umeya. He Shetzivonu Livdoik B'Simone Behemo V'Chaya. V'hu Shiyeh Malim Geiro V'Shisuim Shesa V'oz Yu Mutorim L'Ochlon. So here we have to just go over and decide, what words are here and what words are not. In Kapach, it reads, Atzivu ish nitztavinu b'simoni behemo v'chaya v'hu sheyihu malegeu u parsoson stuka v'oz muterochon. However, whether your geirus over here, the mitzvah is b'simoni or bedika, as you continue further the Rambam, ve'yosenu mitzuvim livdoik, it's very clear that even Kapach interprets it like that's in the text. Okay, so that's what we have. So the verb in the Arabic that we have in front of it doesn't say livdok at the beginning. It's v'hichitzivonu b'simoni behema b'chaya. So let's start slow. The first important thing is this word tzivonu. The Rambam does not say amar over here, but he says al tashriya sharana. So this is sharana. It's sharana concerning the simone behema b'chaya. Sharana, if you're going to have the term sharana, it means there's no clear tzivui over here, but there's a religious legislation, and we're supposed to act according to this legislation and to conform with the dinim of Simone Behema B'chaya. And what are the Simanim? Simanim Malegeira, or V'sheis and Shesa, according to Ibn Tibin. According to Kapach, it's Parsos and Stuka. Okay. Now, it's not a surprise that Ibn Tibin translates it over here as livdoik, as he usually does. He doesn't. It's very strange. Even though he's a translator, he wants to be true to the general ideas of the Rambam, and he sometimes translates things, and usually translates things in context of Minyan HaKotzer or other sources. So here in Minyan HaKotzer, it clearly says livdoik. In Shimem Tes, livdoik behem b'simoni behema shenema zeis achaya she'toichlo mikol v'chule. In the Protei Mitzvos, livdoik b'simoni behema b'chaya lahavdil ben tmeya l'tehera. And I assume we'll see, it could be that this is Kavod, let's say it's premature to talk about the Lashon in Hilchos Malchos Asus. Now, the when he says, especially, he says pasos and stuka, l'chera pasos and stuka. There is a hoof, and it should be split. And this, or even if you have the Lashon Sheis and Shesa, it's a Shiur in Mafris Pasuk, because in the pasuk is called Mafreses Pasuk V'Shoisa Shesa Process, and Rashi says V'Shoisa Shesa Shemuvdolos Milamaylo Milamato B'Shtei Tziponim. It's a complete break. So whichever way you're going to translate it, whether you're going to translate it Shoisim Shesa or Pasos Ztuko, it really is the same thing. However, in the Chayr, there are two Simanim, and that's what the Ram says in Hilchos Malchos Asus, in Perek Aleph Halacha Beis, Simoni Be'em V'Chaya, Nisparsha B'Torah V'Hem Shnei Simonim. Mafreses Parso, Umalas Geira, Ad Shiur Shneim. Okay? So good. There's an issue here. I'm not sure if I have to get involved in it, but the Sifri seems to say there are three Simonim. The Sifri in Re'eh, B'chol Behem Mafreses Parso, V'Shasa Shesa Shtei Process, Umala Geira, Ad Shiur Bo Shloisha Simonim Alolu, Ein Muteres B'Achila. So offhand, it's a stira. The Mizrahi says something, but I think I'm more confused by what he says. He says, Umasha Shaninu B'Sifri, Kol Behem Mafreses Parso, Shasesa, Process Malas Geira, Ad Shiur Bo Shloisha Simonim Alolu, Ein Muteres B'Achila, who Lefi Hanira Min HaKosuf, Shekosa Mafreses Parso, V'Shasas Shesa, Malas Geira. In other words, he says the Sifri is going according to Pshuto Shel Mikra, I assume. But if you really know what it is, Aval Lefi Ha'emes, Eilu Ashloish Shnayim Hem, which is, he's basically turning the world upside down, because the Ram usually interprets that a Stam Sifri is a Pirush Makubal. He says, no, here it's Lefi Pshuto Shel Mikra, and really Lefi Emes is two Simanim. I'm not sure what we gain from this, but whatever it is, the Ram is very clear it's two Simanim. Now, the question is, does these Simanim have anything to do with the kashrus of the behemoth, or it's a modus operandi, a way to identify a behemoth which is kosher? But the fact that it's mafris parsa and sheishes process or pasos and stuka, it just happens to be the way of identification, but it's not the reason why the behemoth is kosher. So in Moreh Nevuchim, it's very clear about this issue. The Rambam in Chelek Gimel, Perek Mem Ches, seems to say that it's a way to be kivei the min hatoho, but it's nothing to do with the kashrus. He says like this: V'da she'ela simonim goitzaloi mahalo as geira u'shesias parsa bebehemois u'snapi v'kaskeses bedogim ein mitzioson sibas haheter v'lo he'edorom sibas isa. the fact that they're extant is not the reason why it's mutter, and their absence is not the reason to prohibit it. V'omnom heim simon yivoda boy hamin hameshubach min amin hamaguna. You should know those behemoths that are higher quality, min hameshubach. It's an identification. It's a way to identify. And the Marit, in Shuas Marit, seems to say this also. In Chelik Aleph, Simon Nun Aleph, Nimsa, the Saire Simona Ba'almo, talking about godless. Kamo Shemosa Simon Behemo, Tehera, V'oma Malas Geira Behemo, Oisa Techela, Behema Fesses Pasa. V'eno Ela Simon Lahavchin, Beina Behema Tehera L'Tmeya. Lo Shahaklita Geiremes Tuma. If it's kolut and it's not soduk, that's not the reason why it's tameh. And he proves it, and the proof is a very nice proof. Teda, shahare onu matirin kolut bimei pora. Kedisna v'peri beis de b'chayres behemet meya shiolda. It's a Mishnah in what Perek Beis should be Perek Aleph. I think it's this. I think it's Perek Aleph. It's I don't know why he said it's Hayim Beis. It's a Mishnah in Bechayres. Behemet Tmei Shiolda Kamin Behemet Tehera also Ba'achila. Utehera Shiolda Kamin Tmeya Behemet Tmeya Muta Ba'achila. Sheyotzim in a tome, veyotzim in a to. Almo lab b'simon Italia milsa utehera. So this is basically taking on this is Reb Chaim's approach in Sefer and Perigimul Malchasos Halacha Yud, that the kvius of heter in behema depends upon motherhood. That if the mother is kosher, the child is kosher, independent of the Simanim. So Yotzei min hatome, Yotzei of kvias minim is Yotzei is kavei the min. The Ritva in Nida seems to have a possibility, at least in Kaskes's Snapir, that they themselves are the reason for the heter. The Ritva Nida, Nunal from a base, the Ramaschal Yag the Torah V'Yadir, Pirish, the Lismoich Vadai be Kaskes's Sagilod. Because Kol Sheyesh Lo Kaskes's Yesh Lo Snapir. It's enough to see scales. You don't need the fins. Umiyu, Kosav Achmona Snapir, Mishum Dele Sagir, Delo Lehave Hosam. Whenever you're going to have Kaskeses, you're going to have Snapir, Kivin Shieshom Kaskeses. V'ulai Hu Gam Kain, Goyrem Taharosai. Afapi Shuhu Levadei Eino Goyrem Tahara. It means the Tahara is through the two Simanim. But if the purpose is to convey the min and nothing to do to Tahara, the Ritva L'chayr is completely out of context. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Ritva is of the opinion that that Mafreses Parsa and Trisah Shesa are also the same. It doesn't necessarily mean they're the same in the Gurim Neheter. It could be that the Ritva is only talking about snapping the Kaskeses because the Mishnah seems to say that it might not apply to Dogim. It talks about blue and Dogim, whatever, it's Boleya, but it's not clear there's a din of Yotzei because only eggs in general. And it could be that in dogim, the kaveh is kaskes snapir, and in behemoths, it's minim. However, whichever way you say, the Ram is very clear that even kaskes snapir is not like that, because the Ram says on both of them that they're not the kaveh in Moreh Nevuchim. And the truth is, this whole idea of kfiyas haminim through Leda would support that approach. Not a proof in dogim, but certainly proof in behemoth tehera. Okay, now here comes. We haven't at all. Okay, let me say I haven't all explained to you where this Bedikas comes from. We'll see about this as we proceed. Okay, but there's a very interesting statement over here. The Ram adds a line over here. V'oz yiyu mutorin la'ochlon. V'oz yiyu mutorin la'ochlon. So I would interpret this that the Ram is coming to tell you that there's no mitzvah just to sit and be bodek Simanim. The mitzvah is, if you want to eat a behemoth, you should check the Simanim to make sure it's a behemoth tehera. You should do the Bedikas in that fashion, then you will know that v'oz yiyu mutar la'ochlon. If this is correct, if it's correct, so we understand why this is an extension from the mitzvahs before, the mitzvah of shechita, for a very simple reason, that this, if you want to eat, shechita, a behemoth requires shechita, so it's part of the seder. In order to eat, you need Bedikas and then shechita. And that would explain the seder of the Rambam, that he says behemoth chaya and oifos, the two types of sugim that require shechita, behemoth chaya and oif. As the Ram says in the beginning of Hilchos Shechita, the behemoth shechitas oif min haTorah. And then he mentioned chagogim and dogim, we didn't do it shechita. So chagogim and dogim are really not part of this. It's just added in order. It's just added in order to finish the group of the four mitzvahs that do Bedikas. But the original connection is because of achil and shechita. Now, however, we have to ask ourselves, there's doch an Aseh over here. Ram says later on, very clearly, he says, Lefikach omu b'somuch l'loshen zeh ein li ela ba'aseh. So he was starting before. L'loshen sifro oisa toichlu oisa b'achila ve'ein behemoth tmeya b'achila. Kloima es sheyesh bo simonim elu hi shemut l'ochlo mashma mizeh she'es she'ein bo simonim elu also la'ochlo. V'zeh lava bo b'cha aseh shu aseh Lefi aklal shebianu. Lefi omu b'samuch loshen ze ein li ela b'aseh minayim b'leisaseh tamaloymo es agomo. So means hine isvay lecho omu oisa b'achila mitzvah aseh v'akavon mitzvah zo ma sheizkarti lecho v'hu she'onu mitzavinu lidosh Simanim. But it means that if you eat the behema tmeya, you violate an aseh. And the Ram says this again in Loisase Kuf Ayin Beis Vu'ulam Isa Achilas Mine Tome Ulam Shal Behema Tmeya Leibo Olel La Bebeyo Avo Me Omroi Ko Behema Fesis Parsam Alas Gera Behema Oisa Techelu Hine Hoidia Shekol Mi She'ein Bo Shnei Simanim O Elu Yachad. If we don't have both of the Simanim, Hu Muza Me'achiloson Avo Hu Lava Bo Mechal Aseh She's boyish Hu Aseh Vashoyitz Leil Lava Bo Mechal Aseh, as the Ram says over here also. So the Isa Aseh is Achilas Behema Tmeya. The Mitzvah Aseh is not Hilu, the mirror image of the Isa. The Mitzvah Aseh is to do Bedika prior to Achila. And L'cheira, we'll see later, Amidst Hashem, the Chinuch says that if you eat a behemoth without Bedika, even if you find it kosher, you violate the Aseh, you bittul the Aseh of Bedika. And the Rivosh says that normally you can rely on Roiv, but if there's mitzvah Bedika, you can't rely on Roiv. So if you rely on Roiv and you eat, and it happens to be kosher, you're mevatel and Aseh. But l'cheira, there's no Isa Aseh of eating Tmeya. You just don't have the Aseh of Bedika. See, here is an amazing thing happening over here. Because the Rambam over here in Kuf Ayin Beis talks about Lava Bo Mechal Aseh. Here he says, V'zeh lav she'ein bo simonim elu osla ochla. If you don't have the simoni tayla, there's nisa achila. Lefikach omru b'samach loshen zeh ein li ele b'aseh minayim b'lo yisaseh. But the isa aseh is eating a behemoth that lacks the simonim. However, the mitzvah say is not eating a behemoth that has a simonim. This is no mitzvah. That's why the Rav is bothered by the question. Lava b'buchal say. The Rav seems to say that it's only an Isa. So the Ramban says no. There's a Bedika. The mitzvah is Bedika. So normally, you see, I would have said Lav. Let's even start. Let's start like this. There's no din that an Isa Aseh and the Mitzvah Aseh have to be the mirror image of each other. And that Rab Chaim clearly points out in Nazi, I think we mentioned already, that the Aseh of Gadol Pera only applies to Nazir Toho. But the Isa Aseh of gram, that the even if you remove the hair without a ma'aseh giluach from the nazir, is an isa aseh, and the isa aseh is even by tameh. So l'chei, you see from this Chaim, the way he interprets the Rambam, that the lava bo mucha aseh, excuse me, an isa aseh and a mitzvah aseh are not necessarily the mirror image of each other. However, I would have said nicha. But if we only know the aseh because lav habo michlal aseh, it means that the lav is derived from an aseh. I would have assumed it has to be the mirror image. And the Ram says it doesn't have to be, which is an amazing thing. I would have said something else also. Lava bo mechlal aseh, I could have imagined that there's a isa to do the opposite of the tzivui. So I would assume that it flips itself and becomes a bona fide tzivui and a mitzvah aseh. And here the Ram says it's basically only sharana. It's only religious legislation. And you can still have the idea of lava bo mechal aseh aseh, which is also very interesting and very odd. And I think it has to be noted. Now, this is a start. What I'd like to do is to move to Mishnah Torah and question whether this is the case in Mishnah Torah, as I always like to do. Is the Rambam really holding his words written in cement, and that he always goes according to what he writes, or he's constantly in the state of creation and reevaluating things? Before we start, let's just look at the text here just to make sure and just know what we have. It says, "VaMitzvah atesha v'aboyim umeya hatzivish nitztavinu b'simoni behemach b'chaya v'hu shiyeh malageira u'fasos n'stuka shois m'shesa v'yoz muta lo'ochlon v'zeh shonu mitzuvin livdoik oison b'simanim elu hi mitzaseh." So the interesting thing is, if you look at the Arabic over here, and zeh shonu mitzuvin, it says in the Arabic ma'amurin, so it's a bona fide tzivui. See, basically he's doing the same thing which he does in Haforis Nedorim, that he starts off inside the hay, and he says it's an amal, and then he says it's a shrano, and it doesn't really make a difference, because that's what I always said. The Rambam, it starts off as religious legislation, but since it's the kavanas hatera that we should do this, it's ki'ilu, it's a tzivui mishnama. It's an implicit command, even though there's no command in the kosel. So maybe the Rambam is doing the same thing over here. However, this may not be the case. And you could say the Mu'ma, he might be because of lava b'mucha aseh. And that tells you that this sharana really becomes a tzivui. Whichever way you like it, the Ram clearly says that Bedikas Simanim is an amal. It means that there's either there's an implicit sivui, either through the agency of Shurana, the implicit sivui, because there's legislation, or maybe because lava bo mochlal aseh, and that itself makes the switch. We don't know what happened here, according to the Rambam. But before, okay, but what is the tzivui? The tzivui is, if you look at the psukim in Shmini, it's that he quotes both of the two psukim. V'hu amroi zeh sachaya shetoichlu. That's the mitzvah say. And then the next pasuk says, "V'loshen siflo oisa toichlu, oisa bachila, ve'ein behemet tmeya bachila." So it's either zeh sachaya shetoichlu or oisa bachila. So means the same sivui command for the mitzvah say is this command for the isaseh, and that's what he's doing. He's saying lava bomachal aseh, correct? That's what we have over here, and it's very clear in Rambam. However, now I'd like to learn Mishnah Torah, and I think the most important thing to do when you're learning Mishnah Torah is understand the context of where Rambam writes things and how he's canning things, okay? He has Perek Aleph. Perek Aleph is basically about the Mitzvas of Bedikas Simanim, okay? Perek Beis is the Perek of the Isa Achila, of the Isa Aseh. And he quotes also the Lav there. The most important thing is that he derives these two phenomena from two different psukim. He introduces a new pasuk as the tzivui in Perek Aleph for Bedikas Simanim, lahavdil vivdaltem, and he maintains these two psukim, or one of the two, of Oisa Teichlo or Chashe Teichlo, as the Isaseh. The kitzi is, if you learn Perek Aleph of Hilchos Machalos Asuros, which he discusses the mitzvah of Simone Behema V'chaya, Simone Oifos, Simone Chagovim, Simone Dogim, there is no mention of Oisa Teichlo or Asher Teichlo, but it's a question of Havdalah or Lahavdil, Vivdaltem or Lahavdil. So it seems maybe that the Rambam is bothered by the lack of symmetry and seems to assume that these two things, these two ideas, are derived from two separate psukim. That's very nice, but that's not what's happening over here. Then you'd ask yourself the question, we have to reevaluate what's the lava bobacha aseh, because if the aseh is not from oisa teichlu, you can't really say it's a lava bobacha aseh. So let's imagine that. Let's look for a second. Hey, Beis, Michlal, Halacha Aleph, Michlal Shenema, V'chol Behema, Mafreses Parsa, V'shoisa Shesa, Shtei Pros, Malas Geira, Behema, Oisa Techelu, Shomei Ani, Shekol She'eno Malas Geira, Mafreses Parsa, Asura. That's the Isaseh. V'lav Habo, Michlal Aseh Asehu. It's amazing. He quotes Lava Bobocha Aseh. But really, he starts off the Aseh in Perek Aleph in a whole different way. Let's see Perek Aleph. I'm not sure how to read this, and I'll just leave it as a question. I didn't see any other nuschos, at least in this thing. Mitzvas Aseh, Leda, HaSimanim, Bohen, Shemavdilim Bohen, Bein Behema V'chaya, V'oif V'dog, V'chagov, Shemutar L'ochlan, Bein She'ein Mutar L'ochlan. So, and he says, Shenema V'ivdaltem, Bein HaBehema Tahira, Latmeir, Ubein HaOif HaTomei Lator, V'nema Lahavda Bein HaTomei Bein HaTor, Ubein HaChaya Necheles, Ubein HaChaya Shelo Sei Ochel. So the mitzvah, the Aseh, is the Havdalah, and the Lava Bobocha Aseh is Ois HaTochel. Two separate things. The first word, Mitzvas Aseh, is very odd because Mitzvas Aseh seems to be in the singular. And here clearly we're talking about four mitzvahs, as the Rambam says in the Protei Mitzvahs. Livdok b'simoni behema chaya v'chaya lahavdil bein tmei l'teira. Livdok b'simoni ha'oif lahavdil bein atomei v'ator l'tor. Livdok b'simoni chagovim lahavdil bein atomei l'tor. Livdok b'simoni dogim lahavdil bein tomei l'tor. So I'm just a little bit confused about this phrase here, but clearly you get the impression the Mitzvas Aseh itself and the Isa Aseh are two different psukim. He says Lava Bobocha Aseh in Perek Beis. Okay. So this doesn't bother me. It should bother me. My opinion is that the Rambam in Mishnah Torah has fallen off from the idea that Lava Bo Mechlal Aseh means that there's a Mitzvah Aseh B'kuv Aseh. The Rambam constantly, throughout the Minyan HaMitzvos, quotes Lava Bo Mechlal Aseh as a proof that it's a Minyan HaMitzvos. However, in Mishnah Torah, he's ready to use it in a different way. How do I know that? I'll give you one example. I think there are more, if I'm not mistaken, but I think I have another one in mind. But this is irrelevant. One is enough for me. The Rambam Yisuri Mizbeach, Perek Hey Alochavov, Aval HaMakriv, Evorei Chaya Tehera. If you take the Evorim of a Chaya Tehera and you makriv agav Mizbeach, Oive Ba'aseh, Ve'eno Loika, Uminayin Shehu Ba'aseh, Shenemar Min HaBehema Min HaBoka Umin HaTzayin Takrives Korbanchem, Cho Min HaChaya Lo Yisakrivo, V'lav Habo Mechlal Aseh Aseh. So the amazing thing is, if you look in the Protei Mitzvahs or look in any form that the Rambam has in Minyan HaMitzvahs, there's no such mitzvah to makriv a behema tehera agav mizbeach as opposed to a chaya. Okay, so he uses the expression lava bo mechal aseh as just an isa aseh, even without it being a mitzvah aseh. So you can't come to me and tell me there's a problem. The Rambam l'taimei in Minyan HaMitzvos we holds as an ironclad cloud. Whatever you say, lava b'macha say, it's a mitzvah say. So good, and therefore he says that the asay is ois teichlu. But over here, Mishnah Torah, where he falls off this cloud, there's nothing that can constrain him to be of the opinion that the Aseh is Moise Tochlu, but the Aseh is Mivdaltem, and there's a lavabo Mocha Aseh from Moise Tochlu. So once you do that, it's easy street, because then you ask yourself a different question. This phrase that the Rambam has, that someone who wants to eat, or you should do this terem achila, I understand if you derive the mitzvah from Oisa Teichlu, that there should be some interdependence on achila. But if the mitzvah is derived from Ivdaltem, maybe the whole thing doesn't exist. I'll just be honest with you. There are achronim that say it doesn't exist, but I'm not sure if the Machalavish Mishnah say for mitzvahs. But the Radvaz seems to say that he can't imagine there should be a Chiyuv Bedikas without achila. It's a Tshuvas Radvaz in Miksav Yad or Chaim Chelek Ches Siman Aleph. Michtav Ach Chaim Yodei Chelek Ches Siman Aleph. Posach Mitzvah Aseh v'chulei. And he says very clearly that that you need to do, it has to be for achila. Okay, only if you want to eat. Okay. That is the first point over here. So now we have a clear, the Rambam in Mishnah Torah and Sefer Mitzvahs, two directions. You know, everything is very clear and well organized in Minyan Mitzvahs. And in Mishnah Torah, he's going out of his way to organize it, not like Minyan Mitzvahs, and to point out the difference. Now, next. Once you accept that the mitzvah is not from Oisa Teichlu, see, you understand, let's say like this. Could you imagine there's a mitzvah saseh to eat a behemoth? Okay? Oisa Teichlu. So you would say that's ridiculous. So the Rambam, knowing that's ridiculous, has to say that the Oisa Teichlu is a shrana. Okay? However, if you make a change and you say the mitzvah is from V'daltem and Lahavdil, maybe you can imagine that it's not a shrana. You shouldn't come to me and come running and says the Rambam also has Lahavdil in Mitzvah Kuf Nun Beis. We quote about all of them. In my opinion, it's not a kefil over there. The Ram's kavona is that the havdil is used letashlim the mitzvah, and it's just to tell you dinim or ideas that you might not have known. But in Mishnah Torah, it's clear that the mitzvah is the lahavdil. So if the mitzvah is lahavdil, maybe it's not a shrana. Maybe it's only a shrana if it derives from Oisa Teichlu, because it's ridiculous to assume there's a mitzvah machila, okay? And that's what the Ravid is coming and attacking the Rambam. That's a lava b'mocha aseh. No Oisa Teichlu. I want to try to prove from the Lashon of Rambam, and I hope you'll accept the proof, that from the Lashon of the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, it's very clear that this is not a shrana. Okay. Now, I did my homework, and in Pratei HaMitzvos, the Rambam usually tells you that a sharana is a din. And I'll show you. I did a brief survey. I can make it much more expansive, but I don't think it's necessary. I think you get the point very clearly as I start reading to you. In Protei Mitzvas, in Hilchos Nedorim, sheyufar haneder oy hashivur v'zehu din hefer nedorim hamafurish b'torah shebiksav. It's a din. In the Protei Mitzvah Erech HaChom, remember those 4 mitzvahs that the Ram seems to say from Kuf Yud Dalid, Tezvav, Tezayin, and Yud Zayin, the 4 mitzvah Erchin seem to be a shrana, at least 3 of the 4 there. So he says like this in Erech HaCharomim, Lo dun be'erkei Adam kasher mefurish b'Torah v'zehu din erkei Adam, Beis din erkei behemo, Gimel din erkei batim, Dalet din erkei sodes, Hey din machrim nechosav. Protei mitzvahs in Hilchos Mishkavu, Metame Mishkavu Moishav. Aleph, din tumas nida. Beis, din tumas yoledes. Gimel, din tumas zova. Dalet, din tumas zav. Now, Hilchos Niskei Momon. Aleph, din ashor. Beis, din ahever. Gimel, din abo. Dalet, din aveira. Now, in Protei Mitzvahs, in Hilchos Malchasuas, it doesn't say din simone behema v'chaya, din simone oifos, din simone chagovim, din simone dogim, but it says livdoik b'simone behema v'chaya, lahavdil bein tmei l'tehera, livdoik b'simone oif, lahavdil bein Homei vatlator. Livdok misimone chagovim lahavdil bein tomei lator. Livdok misimone dogim lahavdil bein tomei lator. So it's very possible that it's bedafka, and the Ram is trying to tell you, in Mishnah Torah, I moved away from everything, and it is a Ramal. It's a bona fide tzibur. Now, the chinuch, as I mentioned before, is very clear that you're mevatel and aseh if you eat a behema without bedika. V'yoive in kuf nun gimel, aseh kuf nun gimel, v'yoive oleh v'loi bodak el shero abo hasimen o echod v'samoch olav v'yochal mimeno af al pi shemotza achakein shehete ochal Bitel Aseh Zeh Shel Bedikas Simanim. It's not an Isa Aseh, it's a Bitel Aseh. Similarly, the Rivosh I mentioned about Goyev is the Kuf Tzadi Beis, that you're not allowed to rely on Goyev because of Mitzvah Bedika. Now, once you do this, then you could say whether I accept the Radvaz that the mitzvah is only if I want to eat, or there's a mitzvah Bedikas some Simanim without. Okay. However, the question is in Mishnah Torah, true, you might, whether we have to know whether you, if you eat, see, if you eat without it, you weren't Mekayim the mitzvah. The question is, when are you supposed to Mekayim the mitzvah? I'm not interested in that. The question is, do you actually need Bedikas Simanim? What is the purpose of the mitzvah? It's to mavdil bein hatome vator, or it's to mavdil bein yesh be Simanim bein ba Simanim. So I would tell you like this, for example, we'll see. See, especially in Mishnah Torah, see, let me ask you another question. You remember we mentioned this Mishnah in Bechiris that if the mother has Simoni Tahara, even if the child is a horse, it's mutar ta'achila, okay? And that's report the Chaim. There's a din yotzei min haTorah for kviyas aminim. So, a priori, if I would have been placing this din in Mishnah Torah, I would have said that, you know, where I discuss all the dinim of beitzim and the beitzim of an oif tome is tome and beitzim oif tor are tor, but it's not a din tara. The isa tome and beitzim is a din yotzei. That it's only a like chatzi shir, whatever the isa is. But you know what the Ram quotes this din of yotzei min haTorah? He quotes in Perek Aleph. Because in Perek Aleph, he tells you the din of Bedikas Simanim. And my impression is the Rambam, you fulfill the din Bedikas Simanim of the sus that was born by me Bedikas the mother. It's not that this behemoth has to have it. You have to identify the min. Once you identify the min, you're okay. This behemoth has no Simanim. But it's a min Torah. You identify the min. But the Simanim are a way to identify the min. Then the Ram can tell you other cases. For example, he tells you, Lefiga hamoitze b'behema midbar. He says that every behema which chews the cud, there's no shinayim lamayla. So he says that v'chol behema shimalas geira harehi mafreses parsa chutz min hagoma. So he says like this: Lefiga hamoitze behema b'midbar v'eino makira umotza chatucha haparsa haprosais boidek b'fir im ein lo shinayim lamayla b'yadu shitahera v'hu shiake gomo. You see, it doesn't have teeth, so then it's tall. If you know it's a gomo, motzei v'shapir chatuch v'chuli, you can rely on it. So you don't need to find Simanim. You just need to, you have a way of, if it has a chatuch l'mayla, we know that there's Simanim, and that's enough. Then the Ram says, later on, Hachalocha Dalid is Behema Tahira, she all the Kimi Behema Tmeya in Haloch Perek Aleph. And then later on, in Halocha Ches, Ein L'cho B'chol Behema B'chaya, She Ba'olam, She Muta B'achila Chutz Me Asoras, Haminim, Hamenuim B'Teira, Shloshi Mene Behema, Shiva Mene Chaya, Lefikoch, Mishu Makiron, Eino Tzorach Livdoik, Loi Befer, because he says, why? If we know the min, we know it's a ma'ilageu mafris parsa. But there's no din of ma'ilageu mafris parsa. You just, but the mitzvah is to identify lahavdil between a min tome and a min tor. It's havdolas aminim. And that's mistaber. So therefore, if the child doesn't have the Simanim, or you identify the min, it's all the same. Or you have the siman the Chacham gave you about the teeth l'mayla, also could be good enough. They're just another thing. The Rambam quotes the din shesua, and the din shesua means a behema shenimsa bimei imoy. The mother was tahor, but it has two gabim, doima l'shtei behemis. And that's shesua. Machuz Rav and Shmuel, what it is. But this is the way the Rambam paskins. And then he paskins if it has an oif toho, if the behemoth gives birth to a tsu of an oif toho. So the question is, what is all this? So the truth is, it's difficult to say that shisu is a min tomei, because the Rambam quotes it in Perek Aleph, this Perek of Bedikas Simanim. Minchasrina says it's nevela. Okay. I don't know if it's nevela or it's not a nevela, but I would tell you the Simanim are not moil to be mata b'achila. You can't be Mekayim the mitzvah of Bedikas Simanim because the Simanim of the aim don't relate to the Shisua. The Simanim of the aim don't relate to the Tzuas Oif. So you can't, it's a chefsa which you can't Mekayim Bedikas Simanim, he puts in Perek Aleph. There's another very interesting question, which I don't know the answer to. I know what the Chinuch says, but it's difficult to believe. The truth is, the Rambam Mishnah sees the point to this. The Rambam quotes in Perek Aleph, Simonim of Chaya, which are nafkamin of Kisi Adam and the Isa Chalef. Okay? Is there mitzvah of Bedikas Simonim by Chaya to be mavdil and to know that there's Kisi Adam? The Chinuch quotes this din in the mitzvah, Kuf Nun Gimel, which is mad. Certainly, if the mitzvah is Oisa Teichlu, it's impossible. But it's Lahavdil, you can imagine it, but the Havdil is Lahavdil Meitam Mator. The Rambam also quotes this in the middle of Perek Aleph, which points to the fact that it's part of Avdolah. But what does all this mean? And the Simanim are nothing to do with the Simanim the Torah is talking about in Parsa, which are Kaveh Taira. This is very difficult. And Mitzvah Hashem, we'll pick this up, pick it to you next week, but this is very rough. And you should know this is the beginning. Mitzvah Hashem, and Mitzvah Hashem next week we'll pick up.